It was a night of electricity, a night when the lights of New York seemed to flicker in rhythm with every thundering shot from Carlos Alcaraz. When he lifted the trophy once again at the U.S. Open, the stadium erupted. Yet in the middle of all that noise stood a young Spaniard whose smile told a deeper story. This was not just about winning another Grand Slam. It was about proving something. Proving that his game, his mindset, and his endless hunger had reached a new level. As he walked into the press conference, Alcaraz looked fresh, almost glowing. The room, buzzing with journalists, quickly settled. The very first question came not from a hardened reporter, but from a child representing the U.S. Open lemonade stand. The innocence of the question. How does it feel winning the U.S. Open for the second time? Drew a wide grin from Carlos. It's still a dream come true, he replied. Maybe tonight I'll celebrate with lemonade. Beneath the light-hearted joke, however, there was a steel edge. Everyone in the room knew what this victory meant. It was his second U.S. Open title, his 6th Grand Slam overall, and, just as important, it restored him to the world #1 spot. For months, Jannik Sinner had loomed over him in the rankings, a reminder that despite all the battles they had shared, Alcaraz had been trailing. Now, with one incredible fortnight in New York, the balance had shifted again. There was more than tennis at play here. Rivalries define eras. Federer had Nadal. Nadal had Djokovic. And now, Alcaraz had Sinner. What made it so fascinating was not just their contrasting styles, Carlos the unpredictable magician, Jannik the relentless baseline machine, but the fact that they were both so young, so fearless, and so desperate to dominate. And tonight, Alcaraz had drawn first blood in what promises to be one of tennis's defining rivalries of the next decade. For Alcaraz, climbing back to world #1 was not just a statistic, it was a statement. In the press conference, he admitted openly, "Since I got the chance to recover the #1, it was one of my first goals of the season. To end the year as #1, that's the dream." His voice carried a mixture of relief and pride, because this was no ordinary achievement. It was about reclaiming something he had once held, something that had slipped away in the tight margins of modern tennis. Journalists pressed him about the meaning of this accomplishment. After all, beating Jannik Sinner had not just delivered him the U.S. Open trophy, it had also given him the top spot in the world rankings. In a season where both players had exchanged victories, the duel had become psychological as much as physical. And for every win Carlos celebrated, there was the looming reminder that Jannik had still been ranked higher. Now, with a single match, Carlos had broken that cycle. He described it simply, but the undertone was clear. Regaining #1 felt like regaining authority. Achieving that once again, he said, is a dream. Doing it on the same day as winning another Grand Slam makes it even better. For a player of his age, such composure was extraordinary. But those close to Alcaraz knew how much he had worked for it. The endless drills, the gym sessions, the tactical discussions deep into the night with his coach Juan Carlos Ferrero. It was more than numbers on a ranking sheet. It was about momentum, about shifting the narrative in his favor. For the last year, the headlines had often revolved around Sinner's rise, his composure, his fitness, his steady climb to the summit. But now, Alcaraz had written his own headline. He wasn't just a contender, he was, once again, the man to beat. The smile on his face during that press conference was not the casual grin of a carefree teenager. It was sharper, almost defiant. A smile that said, "I'm back. And I'm not letting go this time." When asked what made the difference in his game, Carlos didn't hesitate. Variety. His words were simple, but the meaning ran deep. "I feel like I can do everything on court. Slices, drop shots, top spin, flat shots," he explained. "I just trust my physical condition. I feel I can reach every ball, and that gives me the confidence to play with a variety." This unpredictability has become the signature of Alcaraz's rise. Unlike players who live and die by a single weapon, whether it's the booming serve or the crushing forehand, Carlos thrives on the unknown. One rally he's pounding from the baseline, the next he's feathering a drop shot that barely kisses the net. It's chaos for his opponents, but it's calculated chaos. Years of training have honed not just his technique, but his ability to choose the right shot at the right moment. Jannik Sinner himself admitted after the match that he felt too predictable. Against most players, Sinner's relentless baseline consistency is enough to grind them down. But against Alcaraz, predictability is a weakness, not a strength. Carlos studies him obsessively. He watches hours of Sinner's matches, not just because he enjoys the tennis, but because he wants to understand every rhythm, every habit, every tiny pattern that might give him an edge. What makes it fascinating is that Alcaraz openly admires his rival. "I love watching him play," Carlos confessed. And yet, in that admiration lies the seed of domination. He knows Sinner's weapons, he knows his patterns, and he uses them against him. Even if he feels predictable, Alcaraz said, it's still really hard to play long rallies against him. That respect makes their battles even more compelling. They are not enemies. They are mirrors of each other, pushing one another to higher peaks. But where Sinner thrives on discipline, Alcaraz thrives on improvisation. The magician against the machine. The smile against the stare. And in New York, unpredictability won. The message to the tennis world was clear. If you want to beat Carlos Alcaraz, you cannot prepare for a single style. You must prepare for everything. Only a few months earlier, the story had been very different. At Wimbledon, Jannik Sinner had taken control of their rivalry. That final was played largely on his terms. Long rallies from the baseline. Carlos pinned back, unable to unleash his full creativity. It wasn't humiliation. Alcaraz fought hard, but the defeat stung deeply. For a player who thrives on freedom, being caged inside Sinner's rhythm was a wake-up call. Carlos admitted it openly in New York. Right after the match, I thought I need to improve some things if I want to beat him. He didn't wallow. He didn't hide. He took a week off to clear his mind, and then he went straight back to work. But this wasn't the usual routine of endless hitting and fitness drills. It was a focused mission. Together with his coach, Juan Carlos Ferrero, he dissected every detail of that Wimbledon loss. They rewatched the final, not as fans, but as surgeons. Every missed opportunity, every shot that let Sinner dictate, was noted and analyzed. The weeks that followed were brutal. Day after day, Carlos drilled specific scenarios designed to neutralize Sinner's strengths. Drop shots disguised until the very last second, backhand slices to disrupt rhythm, net approaches to shorten rallies, and above all, the mental discipline to stay aggressive even when the rallies grew long. We wrote everything down, Carlos said. What we could have done better, and we worked on it. This is what separates champions from contenders. Many players talk about learning from defeat. Few actually transform that pain into progress so quickly. For Carlos, the loss at Wimbledon was not the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a plan. By the time he stepped onto the courts in New York, he was ready. Every shot that had failed him in London was sharper, more confident, more ruthless. He wasn't there to survive rallies with Sinner. He was there to break them apart and to dictate, to remind the Italian and the rest of the tennis world that Alcaraz learns faster than anyone else. And when he finally triumphed in the U.S. Open final, it wasn't just a victory. It was revenge, redemption, and proof that defeat in the hands of a true champion can be the most powerful teacher of all. When the dust settled on Arthur Ashe Stadium, even Juan Carlos Ferrero, Alcaraz's coach and a Grand Slam champion himself, was left almost speechless. His verdict was simple. Perfect. Few words carry more weight in sport, and even fewer are uttered so sparingly. Ferrero has always been a demanding mentor, the type who never allows his protege to get too comfortable. But on this night, he admitted what the world had just witnessed. Carlos Alcaraz had produced a near-flawless performance. Carlos smiled when reporters mentioned it. Not too many times he has said that I played perfectly, he admitted. And yet deep down he knew Ferrero was right. Against Sinner, good is never enough. To beat him in a Grand Slam final, Alcaraz had to touch perfection. He had to attack without hesitation, defend without fear, and improvise without error. Anything less, and the Italian's relentless rhythm would have smothered him. It was a reminder of the brutal truth of modern tennis. At the very top, margins are razor thin. To win, you don't just need your best. You need the best. And on this night, Carlos had delivered it. Victory in New York was glorious, but Alcaraz knew the clock was already ticking. Tennis is ruthless that way. One tournament ends, another begins. And for Carlos, the next challenge loomed large, the Australian Open. Journalists pressed him about the career Grand Slam, a feat achieved by only the greatest names in history. With 6 majors already under his belt, both he and Sinner now stood just one title away from completing the set. Carlos didn't dodge the question. It's my first goal, he admitted. To complete the career Grand Slam, whether it happens in Melbourne or later, it doesn't matter. I just want to achieve it. His words were calm, but behind them pulsed the ambition of a player who refuses to settle. At just 21, he was already speaking the language of immortality. And yet, in the same breath, he revealed something more human. Winning, he explained, comes with a strange burden. The bad thing about tennis, he said, is that you win a tournament, and right after that, you have to be focused on the next one. Sometimes, You don't even get a day to enjoy it. For a young man living under constant spotlight, it was a rare moment of honesty. That is why Carlos has taught himself to stop, even briefly, and feel the victory, to look at the trophy, to share laughter with his team, to hug his family, to savor, if only for a few hours, the sweetness of achievement before the next battle begins. It's really important, he said, to appreciate every moment. In the end, that is what makes Alcaraz so compelling. He is both the ruthless competitor and the grateful son, the unpredictable genius and the diligent student, the teenager who jokes about lemonade, and the champion who speaks of perfection. As he left the press room in New York, applause broke out among the journalists. Something rare, something reserved for special nights. Carlos Alcaraz had not only won another U.S. Open, he had reminded the world that a new era is here, and its leader is a young man who smiles as he rewrites tennis history. If you felt the drama of Carlos Alcaraz's rise, the tension of every rally, and the fire of his rivalry with Sinner, then don't let the story end here. Subscribe now, and join us for more gripping tales from the world of sport. Hit like if you believe a new era has begun, and drop your thoughts in the comments, because every voice is part of this conversation. Stay tuned, and the next chapter is just around the corner.